Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today to learn the results of the 2017 National Assessment of Educational Progress in Reading and Mathematics. My name is Tanya Matthews. I am President and CEO of the Michigan Science Center in Detroit, Michigan. I am also the Vice Chair of the National Assessment Governing Board. The Governing Board works with the National Center for Education Statistics to produce the National Assessment of Educational Progress, most popularly known as the Nation's Report Card, and of course abbreviated as NAEP, which we decided to pronounce as NAEP. So I will be your MC for what we are calling NAEP Day. And we have both morning and afternoon events planned. This morning, we will hear about and discuss the context of the national and statewide results for the Nation's Report Card. Then we'll take a short break, and at 1 p.m. we will focus on results from the districts in the Trial Urban District Assessment, or TUDA. These are results from our nation's largest and therefore most critical populations. Throughout the day, we will provide opportunities for and questions from both our live audience and those of you watching our live stream. During these Q&A periods, for those of us here in the room, we'll have floating microphones. Please hold the microphones very close to your mouth when you ask a question, and be sure that you're asking a question. And for those of us who are joining us online, you can push the Ask a Question button on the live stream. And for those that simply have comments or thoughts or want to share what's happening today, please tag your Twitter post, #NAEPDay. For those of us who are in the room, please let's remember to silence our cell phones, but don't turn them off, because then you can't tweet about all the amazing things that are happening. And as we are going over all of this, there are one-pagers here available for those who are in the room, and they came in our folders. And if you're watching us online, you can access those same one-pagers at www.nagb.gov. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to first introduce Lim Woodworth. Woodworth is the new commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, and we are delighted that he could join us to make brief remarks. And then he will introduce Peggy Carr, the Associate Commissioner of the Assessment Division at the National Center for Education Statistics, who will present the 2017 results and walk us through what is going on with our nation's children and education. And with that, Commissioner Woodworth.
Good morning. As they said, I am Lim Woodworth. I am the Commissioner of National Center for Education Statistics. And I want to thank you all for coming out today to hear about the results from the 2017 Reading and Math NAEP. The NAEP is referred to as the Nation's Report Card. It is a measure of what students know and what they can do. The reading and math results you're going to see today are based on the frameworks of the National Assessment Governing Board. The NAEP has been going on since 1990 and 1992. It has been given a traditional paper and pencil exam. So we're very excited to announce that this year's results, the 2017, are primarily digital format. This changeover not only allows us to bring the NAEP into the modern times and move away from the traditional paper and pencil and everyone filling in a dot form, but it also provides us with lots of information that researchers are going to be able to really dig into. Information not just on now what the students can do, but how they got there. So this is going to be a really big opportunity, and Dr. Carr will talk about this a little bit as we move forward. The NAEP is used by teachers, principals, parents, policymakers, and researchers to examine students and the education system in America. As I mentioned, Dr. Carr is our director. She is our Associate Commissioner for Assessments. She's responsible for the NAEP as well as all the international assessments. Dr. Carr has supervised the NAEP for 16 years, and to say she is an expert on large-scale assessments would be a large understatement. Dr. Carr has worked and her team have worked very hard on this assessment, and we have full faith and confidence in the scores and all the information presented today. So I know why you're here, so without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Peggy Carr.
So yes, we're here today to talk about the progress of American students, our nation's report card. But the context is more than that. As you've heard, we've made the transition from paper and pencil to DBA, digitally based assessments, in 2017 for our most treasured reading and math assessments, 4th and 8th grade. The transition has taken years, but we're here. It was a very intense process. We did experiments and scientific rigor, eligible for any very rigorous journal. And we know that the nation's students are making progress, sometimes not as much as we want, but there is progress. So what I thought I would do today before discussing the actual results is to give you a window into the experience of our students with these tablets. We're able to measure, as you've heard, not just what the students know and can do, but how they got there. So we can measure constructs, old constructs better, and we can now measure constructs that we had not yet been able to measure before. Let's see a video.
Digital technologies have come to play an increasing role in students' lives, both inside and outside of the classroom. To address this, NAEP is transitioning from paper and pencil to digitally based assessments. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, also called the Nation's Report Card, is a leader in innovation for digital large-scale assessments. NAEP experts use established best practices for delivering digital content and work continuously to enhance the student experience by introducing new question types and activities, while also enhancing the student experience through engaging digital features. Students read rich and engaging passages and have access to features like highlighting to support their understanding of texts. Students examine documents, images, and video to show their understanding of important events, trends, people, and ideas in U.S. history. To demonstrate their knowledge of geography, students analyze and interact with full-color maps, charts, photographs, and videos. Students can respond to questions in mathematics with digital tools, including rulers, calculators, and interactive graphs. They can enter mathematical symbols and notations using an on-screen keyboard. In science, students engage with simulations and apply their knowledge of scientific concepts and principles to solve problems. These and other digital technologies allow NAEP to better measure the knowledge and skills of students from across the nation. These technologies also improve NAEP's ability to make its assessments more authentic, engaging, and accessible. Assessments for the 21st century and beyond.
So I'm very pleased to be here today to present the results for grade 4 and grade 8 results from the 2017 National Assessment of Educational Progress Reading and Mathematics Report Card, also known as our nation's report card. This morning's presentation will focus on the national and the state results, while this afternoon we will turn our attention to the Trial Urban District Assessment, also known to many of us as TUDA. Between January and March of 2017, the math and reading assessments were administered on tablets, the ones you just saw. The two assessments included over 300,000, or nearly 300,000 fourth graders, and nearly 290,000 eighth graders. The results for a nation included both public and private school students. At the national level only, it included only public students, and that's important to remember. Results are available for the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the Department of Defense schools. And then we included Puerto Rico this time around, and we're very pleased to share that with you today. Although they only took the math assessment, these results are very valuable for including in our report.
We also have results for our 27 school districts that volunteered to participate in TUTA, but again, that will be this afternoon. We report student performance in two ways: scores and achievement levels. For math and reading, scores for students in the 4th and 8th grade are reported on a scale from 0 to 500. The higher the score, the greater the proficiency for the student. These scores indicate what students know and can do. Achievement levels, developed by the National Assessment Governing Board, provide meaning to these scales. They describe what students should know and be able to do by identifying points on the scale for performance of standards that can be articulated into basic, proficient, and advanced. Ultimately, the goal is to have all students performing at the proficient level. Students who reach this level have achieved solid mastery over challenging subject matter. That's something that is important to remember. So let's look at the national results. We're going to begin with grade 4, math. All those students have improved by 27 points, as indicated by the asterisks here, since 1990. There was no significant change in average math score for 4th graders compared to 2015. These 5 percentiles of the scale, shown here, indicate students' ability. This is the ability distribution for the entire scale. For the 90th and the 75th percentile, these are our higher performing students. At the 25th and the 10th percentile, this is performance that we have identified as our lower performing students. And then the 50th percentile is similar, but we have to keep in mind it's not always identical to the average score. As shown here, the 10th and 20th percentiles, again, our lower performing students, there's a decline from 2015 to 2017. In 8th grade math, the average score was also not statistically different from the 2015 one we reported, but there has been improvements since the first assessment year, nearly 20 points, again, as indicated by the asterisk next to the 263. When we examined students' performance across the entire ability distribution, we found that higher performing students at the 75th and the 90th percentiles improved since 2015, while the lower performing students, particularly those at the 25th percentile, well, they had declines. So now let's turn to reading. In 4th grade reading, we have average scores that were not statistically different from 2015, but there has been improvement since the first assessment year. The scores are up 5 points in comparison to 1992. When we examine the entire ability distribution, an interesting pattern emerges. Since 2015, we saw declines at the 25th and the 10th percentiles. This is similar to what we observed in grade 4 math from 2015 to 2017. Finally, 8th grade reading was the only grade and subject in which there was an overall improvement in comparison to 2015. The average, once you round the numbers up and down, is 1 point, is statistically significant. And in addition to that 1 point, we have 7-point increase in comparison to 1992. When we examine the entire ability distribution once again, we see here that scores at the 50th, the 75th, and the 90th percentiles all showed increased in scores in comparison to 2015. Now, this is consistent with the overall average that I just discussed at grade 8 reading. So let's sum up. These are some very interesting patterns here across the percentiles. We saw the pattern that the lower performing students in grade 4 had scored declines in 2017 in comparison to 2015. Meanwhile, higher performing students in grade 8 saw improvement from 2015 to 2017 in both math and reading. And in the case of 8th grade math, we found a bifurcation of scores, with the top performing students improving, while some, in particularly the 25th percentile, showing declines. Now let's take a look at changes in percentages of students performing at the various achievement levels I mentioned earlier. You can see grade 4 on the top and grade 8 on the bottom, with math on the left and reading on the right. The stacked bars show percentages at each achievement level for each grade, subject, and year, with the highest, I should say the lightest shade of blue indicating percentages below basic, and the darkest shade indicating percentages of students at the advanced level. The percentage of students who performed at basic decreased for all grades and subjects between 2015 and 2017. In grade 8 reading, that would be the bottom right, the percentage of students who performed at proficient and at advanced increased in 2017 compared to 2015. But yes, let's keep in mind that over the long haul, over the long range, the picture is showing that the percentage of students who perform below basic has decreased for all grades and subjects, and the percentage who performed at or above proficient, again, solid mastery over challenging subject matter, has increased for all grades and subjects. Now we've gone through the national results. I'm going to turn to the state results and the other jurisdictions. Grade 4 mathematics. Let me first orient you to how to read the slide. The darker blue will indicate states and jurisdictions that have shown improvement from 2015 to 2017. The lightest blue will indicate states and jurisdictions showing a decline. And in the middle, you will have the states and jurisdictions that did not change or held steady. So, 2 increases in comparison to 2015. Florida and Puerto Rico. Strong show of improvement for Puerto Rico. And in the case of Florida, they reported the highest gain ever in their results. Very impressive. But there were declines for 10 states and jurisdictions indicated here. 8th grade math. Again, you read the chart, the figures in the same way. Two states and jurisdictions, again, Florida and ODEA, that stands for the Department of Defense schools, showing improvement. But there were some declines, Alaska, Rhode Island, and Vermont for 8th grade mathematics. 4th grade reading. No state or jurisdiction showed an improvement over this time period. Most remained steady, 43, but there were some significant declines for our states and jurisdictions as indicated here. 8th grade reading. This is where we actually observed the most improvement among our states and jurisdictions, 10 to be precise. Most held steady, 41, and we did see one state decline. Now I'm going to switch to achievement levels. I just discussed scale scores. And in the next series of charts, you'll see how our states and jurisdictions compare to the nation in terms of the percentage of students at or above the proficient level. In this first chart, fourth grade mathematics, you'll see for the nation, the public only, 40% of the students in this country are at or above proficient level. 15 jurisdictions have students that scored higher than that. 19 comparable to the 40, and 19 below the 40. Turning now to 8th grade mathematics. At the national level, 33% of our students in this country are at or above that preferred level of proficient. 20 jurisdictions scored higher than that, 13 comparable to, and 20 below. Eighth grade reading. At the national level, we have 35% of American students reading at the proficient, at or above the proficient level, 17 jurisdictions higher than the 35, 20 comparable to, and 17 lower. Percentage of students at or above proficient in states compared to the nation. Are we still on 8th grade reading? Yes. 35%, 17 above, 21 comparable to, and 14 below. I want to now turn to gaps. It's important to evaluate gaps in this country. And we see here not a lot of changes in our gaps. When we did see changes, they were mostly widening of the gaps as shown here. There were some narrowing of the gaps, but mostly widening of the gaps. And in most cases, it's the minority students, the Black and Hispanics, that are declining in these states. In Arizona and Arkansas, Kentucky, and Louisiana, the Black-white gap actually widened. In Alaska and Georgia and Louisiana and New Mexico, the white-Hispanic gap widened. We did see some narrowing of the gaps for 4th grade mathematics and for 8th grade mathematics in Indiana, but the widening of the gap for North Carolina and Kansas are noted here. Turning to reading, we've seen even fewer changes in the gaps. Still some widening of the gaps in Arizona and in Tennessee, some narrowing of the gaps in District of Columbia and Kansas, I should say. And I want to point out that narrowing of the gaps is not always preferred. You have to discern how those gaps are narrowing. In the case of District of Columbia, for example, the whites actually decline. The whites in District of Columbia, however, are still the highest scoring whites in the country. But yet, we see a narrowing of the gap in this way. For 8th grade reading, the gap widened for Dodia schools, and in Massachusetts, there was a narrowing of the gap for the white Hispanics. I want to sort of end my presentation where I started and talk a little bit about digitally based assessments. I want to show you a passage that was administered in 2017. It's actually the same passage that was administered in 2015, identical, but it's prettier. There's color. We use our innate platform, and you can see here we're able to track where students are, how long they stay there as they're reading the passage. And we can even discern Whether they read the passage fully or they go to the items, we always have 10 items per passage. 2 of the items, around 6 or 7 in this particular one, they have like 30 minutes to complete this passage, are constructed response questions, and we're asking them to give us a sort of short essay to respond to our comprehension questions. So what I want to show you is sort of a game changer that you will see in our report card. We are able to evaluate, as I indicated earlier, not just whether the student got the answer right, but what process did they pursue in achieving that response. So I'm going to show you something I call the beehive. These are about 600 students we randomly selected, and you can see them moving from page 1 to page 2, and then going to the questions. Well, if you look closely, some of them are reading the questions before they read the passage, but maybe that's okay. And some of them are reading all of the questions and then going back to the passages. It's just very, very interesting and very diagnostic. Imagine being able to bifurcate these data by low-income and high-income students, or maybe just boys and girls, pink and blue. You're going to be able to have greater insight into the students' processing and arrival at those answers. So I invite you to visit our nation's report card. You can see here there's going to be more information far beyond what I've shared with you today. It's deep, it's rich, it's exciting, and it's interactive. Thank you. I think we're now ready for some questions.
Okay, hi, my name's Guy Brandenburg. I'm a retired DC public school teacher. And I was just kind of curious, normally these NAEP results are released around October or November, and here it's been a full year. Students are now taking, their final No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top or Every Student Shall Exceed Act tests for this year. How come it took so long? Thank you.
Well, we've been busy, and we're usually pretty good about releasing the results in 6 months in the normal course of the administration of the assessment when we have paper and pencil. We have that down pat. But we had to go about the business of transitioning these paper and pencil hundreds of items for reading and math 4th and 8th grade. And we took our time. We were meticulous. We used scientific experiments. And we needed to be sure that we could transition these trends into the future with DBA with utmost scientific rigor. And so we took a lot of time analyzing the data and evaluating the data, making sure that underneath the nation we had invariant, not a lot of dissension from the national bridge that we did. So it was worth every penny, because now we have 25 years of trend data that we can move into the 21st century in its proper format, in a digitally based format. That's why it took us so long.
Good morning, everybody. My name's John Aroundhim from the National Indian Education Association. And my question is actually several questions, but try to boil them down here. How is NAEP ensuring accurate representation of students in school districts with limited access to computers, broadband, and education technology? And number two, and perhaps it wasn't, it's in the assessment, but it's a different construct of it. But why are BIE schools, Bureau of Indian Education schools, not included in the assessment, or just Native students in general?
Well, two good questions. Well, we ensured comparability in a number of ways. We went into the schools with our own tablets and enclosed systems. We even took our own internet. We took our routers. We did not depend on the schools to have access, unreliable access, devices that were not comparable, that could not carry the minimum requirement for these very innovative tasks that we had. So we entered the school with our tablets and our routers and our file structures to transmit the information within an enclosed system. We did not depend on schools that did not have the equipment sufficient enough to administer the assessment. And we did a lot of other things to ensure comparability. We had tutorials. We did cognitive labs and proof of concepts on the items, making sure that students of various backgrounds had access with little difficulty, little no difficulty to the items. We included accommodations, the same accommodations that we provided for paper and pencil in this eNAEP system that I described. We even included what we call universal design. In the nice video that I showed you earlier, you could see the student did a highlighting with the yellow. Well, that's a universal design. Anyone can do that. You can also ask the eNAEP to tell you the word if you don't understand the word. That used to be only an accommodation. Now any student can do it. We did a thorough, complete, and comprehensive job to ensure equity and access to these DBA assessments. Now, with regard to BIE schools, they are typically in our assessment. We have support from the Office of Indian Education and the U.S. Department of Education, but that's only done every 4 years. So if you don't see them in here, this was not the year for that inclusion of the oversampling of those schools. But we are just really pleased with our relationship with the BIE schools. 80–90% of them participate. Really, it is a partnership that works. So thank you for your question.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm an intern at the Alliance for Excellent Education, and I was just curious if you did any post-surveys with students that participated in this new technology to see if they liked this in comparison to previous types of assessments, or if they would appreciate using a different type.
Well, I would probably ask if you were planted. Because I could have really brought in all the wonderful quotes from students and from parents. These students were so excited about this opportunity. Teachers would tell us, for example, when we had the paper and pencil, watch out for little Johnny, he's going to go to sleep, you have to wake him up. Not so with these assessments. Students would continue to answer questions long after almost all the other students have left. Usually when students see other students leaving, they're ready to go too. Not so for these DBA assessments. Students loved it. One parent, for example, wrote us and said, every day when my child gets in the car, I ask, what was good about your day? And she said when her child said, I took NAEP, she turned around and looked at the child and says, well, what in the world is NAEP? The students loved it. We gave them ear buds that they could keep. They were so excited about that. I had one parent call me and said, oh, my child lost her earbuds. I can't stop her from crying. Can you send me more? I mean, the stories are just numerous. So thank you for your question.
We have one question from our online audience, please.
Yes, this question is from Sarah Lubienski at Indiana University, and she asks, might the increases among high-performing students and decreases at the bottom percentiles be related to the shift to e-assessments?
No, absolutely not. And we have several empirical answers to that question. First of all, the trend from 15 to 17 was established with paper. So as we have done for many, many years, over the 25 years of this assessment program, we move from one year to the next using common items. In this case, from 2013 to 2017, using paper to paper. All assessments try to obtain, most assessments I should say, try to retain as much of the assessment from time period 1 to time period 2. NAEP does a stellar job of that. 80%, 75% of the assessment is retained for administration in the subsequent year, and we did the exact same thing in 2017, moving from 2015 to 2017. So the trends that you see here today are based upon paper, not digital. That's just one answer. There are many, many more. And some of the answers to your questions can be found in other snapshots of what students know and can do in this country that have nothing to do with NAEP. Pearls, TIMS, also found declines in the lower end of the ability distribution, and they have not made the transition to DBA. So these are true results of performance that we're seeing here today. There's one more question. Was that what you meant by that?
Karen Chenoweth from the Education Trust. So I get that you equated and you took that extra time on the national results. Were you able to do the same for the states? In other words, can we have the same reliability? Can we look at the state trends with the same sense of reliability that we can the national?
Good question, and the answer is an emphatic yes. Like all large-scale assessment programs, linking and equating is done at the national level so you can retain a common yardstick for the states, and of course that was our goal. We treasure our trends. It is our highest priority, but not in sacrificing integrity and quality and comparability of the trend lines. So to further answer the man's question earlier, we took the time to examine the state, any residual from the states to determine if states were being unfairly advantaged or disadvantaged using the national level linking that we always use. We found some variation, but quite honestly, not more than what you would see in sampling variability, most of which was not statistically significant. And so we looked within the national subgroups, within the districts and the states, within subjects, within grades, within states, across states, nothing that alarmed us to sacrifice these valuable trends moving forward into the future. Thank you for your question.